Greetings, gaming citizens. Mike here. It's my first day as a travel advisor, and I'm struggling to figure out what to recommend to my client here. My client is looking for a multi-day event that centers around their hobbies of playing video games and telling people that their opinions are wrong on Twitter. Takes place in a city they wouldn't be caught dead living in, but are okay with visiting. Features overpriced venue food and merchandise, and has an alarming amount of people that don't believe in hygiene. Where can I find such a place? I love video games, in case it wasn't obvious. I enjoy playing them and talking about them, but I'll be damned if I have an excuse to go outside and interact with people who also love video games. In comes the video game convention, the golden opportunity for geeks to hang out with fellow geeks, while also providing a case study for how ineffective deodorant advertisements truly are. Gaming conventions can be traced all the way back to the Consumer Electronics Show in 1979, where Atari computers were shown off. Just a few years later, the Nintendo Entertainment System would make its North American debut at the same show in 1985, starting a trend of video game systems being given attention at tech industry trade shows. Before we dive into game conventions, it's worth making a distinction between a convention and a trade show, as I've noticed there's somewhat of a crossover between those in tech industry specifically. A trade show is meant to be for business, where only companies within an industry attend and host booths for other companies to visit and initiate business conversations. Meanwhile, a convention is meant to serve as a more public-facing event, being a business-to-consumer show. Now, as we get into gaming conventions, take that information and throw it out the window, because gaming events don't follow that formula at all. Starting in 1988, the Game Developer Conference, or GDC, hit the scene in some random living room with 25 game developers, only to be hosted in various venues before settling on San Francisco, California in 2007, and remaining there to this day. GDC as we know it today is a far cry from those humble beginnings, hosting over 20,000 attendees and including more than just developers. GDC today isn't just for devs. It's packed with press, aspiring students, and people like me hoping for eye contact with someone from Sega. All for the low price of Okay, let's be fair here. This is primarily for game developers and not regular people like you and I. Odds are, if you're from a big-name studio, they have money in the company budget to send a small team to GDC. But still, if you're trying to get into the industry or are part of an indie team, good luck getting there, much less getting a single badge. I don't want to be too harsh when talking about GDC's pricing, because there is a lot to these decisions that I don't know about. Plus, I'm also trying to work in the industry, so I should choose my words carefully. But you have to admit, there are some groups of people that are absolutely priced out of events like this. Before I go more into that rabbit hole and sounding like I'm telling GDC to just be cheaper, I'm gonna move on, because I acknowledge that events like that are expensive for a reason. Some of gaming's most influential voices gather at GDC to shape where the industry's headed, so naturally they wouldn't want any regular consumer to just walk in and complain about $80 games to the Nintendo guy. Speaking of events like GDC, E3 was another big industry event, consisting mostly of people representing big companies and the media. It was established in 1995 after the aforementioned CES treated the video game industry very poorly in their representation. From then on, E3 became the premier games industry event. Unlike GDC, E3 was closed off from public entry until 2017, specifying that attendees had to verify a professional relationship with the industry, whether that was as a developer or a member of the press. Here we see yet another case of a games industry event starting off as professionals only to allow the public in years later. That's not to say this is exactly a bad thing. For a while, E3 was the Super Bowl of gaming announcements. Every year, gamers around the world would look forward to a solid week of gaming news, with a publisher basically having a day to themselves. It didn't matter if you were there or not, because in the 2010s, we tuned into those press conferences via live streams or videos on YouTube. It was thanks to E3 that we even have Nintendo Directs, since that's where they got their start. Sadly, though, E3 fell by the wayside when the pandemic hit in 2020, only for it to try and make a return in 2021 as an online-only event, but to no avail. While E3 may have been on a slight decline, with Sony no longer making an appearance starting in 2019, it's safe to say the pandemic is ultimately what killed E3. the online-only format just didn't feel quite the same, and when the ESA tried to bring it back in person in 2023, there just wasn't interest in an in-person event anymore since everyone pivoted to digital presentations. It's a shame, too, because the revamped E3 would have been organized by ReedPop, who do all sorts of conventions, including one that we'll talk about in just a moment. But needless to say, E3 will definitely stand as a significant event in gaming history. And it seems like its legacy will still live on with the ESA, as they announced a brand new convention called IICon, set to take place from April 27th to the 30th, 2026 in Las Vegas. Participants of this event include all the major players in the gaming space, your Microsofts, your Nintendos, and etc., as well as other large corporate entities like Disney and Amazon. It seems this will be an industry-exclusive event like the old E3 days, so don't go buying your flights to Vegas just yet. According to the official site, this event is for visionary leaders from diverse sectors to explore new approaches that will drive innovation and growth. Make of that definition what you will, because I have no idea what the hell that actually means. If I were a betting man, I'd say this is a trade show dedicated to crossing paths between industries and further advancing technologies like AI and interactivity in completely different spaces. But only time will tell what this event is truly about and what comes of it in the years to follow. While the rest of us were mourning the loss of E3, Jeff Keighley had other ideas. The same year that E3 was cancelled due to COVID, in came the Game Awards host with Summer Game Fest, a digital-only presentation event similar to E3. Jeff's logic was that all these publishers had these announcements ready to go, but nowhere to really show them off, so he wanted to provide an avenue for them to show their work. Regardless of how you may feel about SGF or Jeff Keighley in general, because I know he's a very divisive figure, you have to admit it is very impressive that he wrangled up all these announcements in just a few months. Summer Game Fest would continue to evolve into a large assortment of other showcases in addition to the main show, creating essentially a long weekend of gaming news. If you saw my video about gaming events, you have an idea of just how massive SGF has gotten in terms of the variety of showcases. In this year alone, the amount of showcases that happened during the summer of gaming is pretty much in the 30s now, as of the recording of this video. While there is an in-person portion to SGF, it's not exactly the same as a convention or a trade show per se. At most, you can get a ticket to see Summer Game Fest in person, which is what everyone else is watching at home. I guess if you're attempting to network, it could be a compelling prospect, but as someone who did go to the Game Awards, it doesn't exactly pan out that way. Otherwise, the only other in-person aspect of SGF is Play Days, which is only for the media. But Mike, I hear you saying, these are neat events and all, but where are all of the Redditors? Penny Arcade Expo, or PAX, made its debut in 2004 out in Bellevue, Washington. Penny Arcade is a webcomic series created by Jerry Holkins and Mike Verhulik. They created PAX out of the desire to attend a show exclusively for gaming. Over the years, PAX has grown exponentially, where at one point they were hosting 6 events per year. That said, the current lineup of PAX events consists of West, formerly known as PAX Prime and held in Seattle, Washington, PAX East, which is held in Boston, Massachusetts, PAX Oz, which is held in Melbourne, Australia, and PAX Unplugged, which is a tabletop-focused convention held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. PAX East has a special place in my heart, as it's not only the only PAX I've attended, but pretty much the only gaming event that even happens in the Boston area, aside from maybe Fan Expo Boston, but that's more of a general pop culture convention. So it's my one opportunity to meet and chat with folks in the industry. And if you want to see my video about the most recent PAX East, click the thing in the top right corner. PAX is hands down the biggest public gaming event of the year. I have yet to hear of a gaming event that even comes close to this level of attendance or notoriety by the gaming community. Most big names in games show up to PAX, and it's 4 days of just nerds being nerds, and I mean that in the best way possible. But what does one do at a PAX, you may wonder? Anything that doesn't give your bank a heart attack.
Hi, this is your bank. We noticed a transaction of $500 from BigBootyBodyPillows.com. Is this a fraudulent transaction? No. I don't need to know what you're using it for.
PAX conventions are usually filled to the brim with things to do, with one of the most popular attractions being the Expo Hall. Typically the heart of a convention, the expo hall is where companies set up a variety of booths to showcase games that have yet to release, ongoing games that are getting new updates, or some big unrelated brand will just set up shop like Dunkin' f***ing Donuts. Sometimes a booth pops up and you're like, Dunkin' Donuts at a gaming con? Sure, why not? In 2024, we had Mountain Dew set up a huge booth, which, to be honest, just makes sense. Anyone that's played video games will tell you that Mountain Dew is basically the drink of the gods for gamers, and it was especially prevalent in the 2000s and the MLG era. The Expo Hall was where I spent pretty much my entire day when I first started attending PAX East in 2017. There's just something special about walking in the Expo Hall for the first time and looking around at all the booths as you slowly descend on the escalator. There's truly no feeling like it, and I'm not alone. I've heard that from hundreds of people that I've talked to at conventions. I remember seeing the Expo Hall for the first time, and for a brief moment, the entire venue went silent in my head as I just took in the sights of the sheer amount of booths populating the floor. It sounds cheesy, but it genuinely was a core memory for me. As for what to do in the Expo Hall, a lot of booths will have demos for games that are either releasing soon, indies that are trying to gain more exposure, or sometimes a company like Nintendo will have a whole booth dedicated to Pokemon despite no major Pokemon releases that year. In 2024, Nintendo had 3 whole booths dedicated to purely Pokemon for some reason, and 2 of those were for the TCG. The demos they had on the show floor were for Detective Pikachu 2, Scarlet and Violet, and Legends Arceus. Keep in mind, there were no major announcements in the Pokemon franchise except for that brief teaser for Legends ZA, so there was no real reason for Nintendo to go all out for Pokemon that year. But hey, I can't complain too much. The Nintendo booth is always fun to visit whenever I attend PAX, as over the years I've gotten stuff like pins and even a hat from hanging over there, which leads me into one of my favorite aspects of the Expo Hall: free shit. When you're setting up shop at a convention, you gotta find a way to make yourself stand out amongst the hundreds of other exhibitors there. So what better way to do that than to throw trinkets at anyone that gives you eye contact?
And you know where I can find the bathroom?
Most of the time, the big dogs have some kind of thing to give out to people who visit their booth to try out game demos. Nintendo has been consistent in this by handing attendees pins that look like the gold and platinum points from My Nintendo. You have to check in with an employee to get it, but it's a pretty neat pin set for basically no commitment. You don't even need to be subscribed to NSO or have a certain number of gold points to get it.
Welcome to the Nintendo booth. Just scan the QR code behind me and we'll be able to get you some My Nintendo rewards points. The only game I bought this year was Balatro.
Free swag is one of my favorite parts of PAX, because it gives me the chance to check out games I wouldn't have discovered otherwise, or it's just a cool memento from visiting a booth by a big publisher like Square Enix. It was so fascinating to me that I started the Swag Map project in 2018, where I quite literally map out where all the free stuff is on the show floor. As a result, I've acquired quite the pile of neat shit. I'm thankful I'm not the only one who enjoys this, because the project gets quite a bit of attention from the community, but that's another aspect of conventions I'll get into later. Going back to the Expo Hall in general, there are plenty of indie games that populate the show floor, and in my opinion, those are the most worth checking out. One thing I've learned from my years of going to PAX is that when it comes to the big names, you'll spend at least half your day just waiting in line, so you're better off just doing something else. Over time, I've come to accept the idea that as an attendee, I have to make the decision of, do I want to spend 3 hours in a line for a single booth like Nintendo, or use that 3 hours to check out a dozen other booths or activities? Depending on what you're going to PAX for and how many of the 4 days you're attending, the answer can vary. But if you don't like walking around the show floor with game demos and pop-up shops, you can always visit panels. Another core pillar of PAX, and conventions in general to boot, panels are hosted throughout the weekend and can offer some really entertaining activities. There are panels for networking in the industry, content creators looking to up their game, developers showcasing major updates, or even game shows that test your trivia knowledge. In the past few years, I've been implementing panels into my weekend schedule at PAX, and I have to say, it has kind of made my experience better. Over the years, I've met all kinds of YouTubers and had a lot of fun in general. One of my favorite panels was from last year, where the community had to create an essential list of must-play games for the Nintendo DS. We had to pitch what made the game a must-play in 15 seconds. I pitched Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story because I'm a man with taste, and it was a great time to see people have fake arguments over which DS games were the best. One thing to definitely take away from that was that Spectrobes was the only correct answer. Going back to the subject of panels, there are a whole swath of panels to experience, so if you're looking to interact with fellow gamers in an environment that's different from a 3-hour queue for the Nintendo booth, I recommend looking into checking out some next time you're going to a PAX convention. Or if there's panels happening at a convention that you go to that isn't PAX, check it out there. There's probably just as much interesting stuff happening over there. Before moving on from PAX, one major aspect about this convention that really stands out is the culture. Sure, anyone can host an event that throws a bunch of gamers into a room and call it a day. PAX has created a culture in and of itself in the 20 years it's been running. For one, the enforcers really make PAX what it is. They always bring a camp counselor energy to the convention, but it's in such a way that appeals to the attendees that they feel like one of us, even though they technically are. They're just as much of a gamer as anyone else. They are helpful for telling you where something is, but they are also just as whimsical and silly. Not only that, but there is a whole subculture of pin training and pin collecting that is fueled by PAX officially. Most conventions will maybe hand out a few pins here and there, but PAX goes the extra mile to have officially sponsored pins made for distribution and trading, some of which are found at specific booths on the show floor. It's made finding pins an activity in and of itself, and it's really cool to see how they've cultivated their own subculture in their own convention. Lastly, the people are a unique aspect of PAX. I can't quite put into words how special the social environment is at PAX, but I've found myself chatting it up with random people waiting in line to try a demo or go to a panel. I don't know if there's a word for this type of social environment, but PAX is just the perfect vibe for casually chatting with fellow game enjoyers. And of course, the people are what makes the SwagMat project a lot more endearing. I get a lot of community feedback on that, and it's been a great experience doing that since 2018. Now, normally, in a video like this, I would talk more about the conventions I've been to and the like, but the truth is, I've only ever gone to PAX East, which leads me to the major barrier for people wanting to go to conventions: travel. Not everyone has a PAX nearby, so what are your options if you can't fly across the country, or across the world in some cases? A few of the larger conventions have been able to get around this by streaming some of the panels on sites like Twitch or uploading the video of panels to YouTube, but many, including myself, would argue that it's not the same as being there in person, especially for something like PAX, which is very community-oriented. While in a perfect world, everyone would be able to go to any convention they wanted, that's unfortunately not the case. I've always wanted to be able to go to something like Gamescom or Tokyo Game Show, but just never really had the means to do so. I can never even go to PAX West, even if I really wanted to. With that said though, if you're able to save the money to travel to a convention, I would highly recommend it. I was originally going to end the video there, but I felt that it was worth including what other conventions are out there around the world in case you're considering making the trek to one yourself and don't quite know if there is one near you. So with that said, let's check out just a couple of the most popular game conventions that happen around the world. Spoiler alert, I already mentioned them in this video. Since it's topical, given that it's August, let's start with Gamescom. Hosted in Cologne, Germany, Gamescom is easily the biggest gaming event in Europe and is one of the biggest industry events in the entire world, hosting up to 370,000 visitors. Gamescom debuted in 2002 in Leipzig as the Games Convention, before moving to the Köln Messe in 2009 as the previous venue's limited transport links and hotel accommodation bottlenecked the event. Leipzig opposed this change to the point where the name The Games Convention couldn't be used, so the German Federal Association for Entertainment Software, or BIU as it's abbreviated in German, opted to host what is now known as Gamescom. If you're not familiar with Gamescom, chances are you've at least heard of Opening Night Live, which is a live broadcast that kicks off Gamescom for everyone. This show is similar to Summer Game Fest, as it's a multi-hour-long broadcast of game trailers and announcements hosted once again by Jeff Keighley. As for Gamescom itself, you thought E3 was massive? Gamescom as an event is several times larger than E3 ever could have been. To give you an idea of how much there is to do, the Köln Messe has 11 separate halls to populate with booths and meeting spaces. It's so big that every attendee can have a square meter of space for themselves, as the total floor space is 384,000 square meters, if you count both the indoor and outdoor spaces. As for what to do at Gamescom, it's unique in the sense that it houses both business and consumer spaces. Looking at this expo map from 2023, if you're a regular attendee looking to just try some of the latest games and have some fun, you would be in halls 6, 8, 9, and 10, with business talks and meetings taking place in halls 2, 3, and 4. And as of the recording of this video, they just released the floor plan for 2025, and now it's 6, 7, 8, 9, and a little bit of 10. They change it every year. It's a little confusing. Obviously, I've never gone to Gamescom, but I would love to go someday, as I've heard from colleagues who have gone that it's a similar experience to PAX, just on a much larger scale. Gamescom has expanded beyond Germany, though, as there are Gamescom events for Asia and Latin America held in Bangkok, Thailand, and Sao Paulo, Brazil, respectively. Though in the latter of the two events, it seems the game convention magic wore off with the blatant mistreatment of Brazilian game developers, citing 12-hour workdays with no breaks or coverage of food, transportation, or accommodations. Hopefully, we'll see improvements made in the treatment of those people next year, but let it be known that the game convention magic can certainly wear off if you're exhibiting versus attending. And I would know. I worked the show floor at PAX East, and the only magic was the fact that I managed to stay awake the whole time. Another big event takes place in the birthplace of games, Tokyo, Japan. Taking place in September, Tokyo Game Show is an event with a major focus on Japanese games, with a handful of international companies using it as a vehicle for new releases or hardware. Tokyo Game Show goes for 4 days, with the first 2 days being for business only, and the other 2 days allowing for public entry. With an attendance record of nearly 300,000 people, it goes without saying that this is the second largest gaming event in the entire world. Similar to Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show has several areas for exhibitors, with the layout changing every year to accommodate its growing scope. Unlike Gamescom Köln Messe, Tokyo Game Show's Makuhari Messe has just 2 large halls for booths, segmented into 11 interior halls with 1 through 8 being connected and 9 through 11 just below that. Again, kinda confusing as an outsider looking in. Looking at footage of this event, it makes PAX East feel microscopic in comparison. The official program guide for this year's upcoming show even posts statistics about 2024's show in comparison to 2023, and said there were 985 companies at Tokyo Game Show last year, with 2,850 unique titles present. That is a 25% increase in companies and 24% increase in titles shown. Statistics aside, Tokyo Game Show has been one of my favorite events to hear news from, as I love Japanese games, if that wasn't obvious already. I mean, Nintendo. If you've been to Tokyo Game Show, definitely let me know what you thought of it down below, because I would love to go someday. Maybe you're not trying to enter the industry or talk business. There's still tons of other events worth going to, and one of the events I keep hearing about is the Music and Games Festival, aka MagFest, in January. While there are several events run by the organizer, the headlining event takes place in Maryland, here in the US. The main attraction for MagFest is the Arcade Hall, which is open for 24 hours during the 3-day show. Here you'll find hundreds of arcade machines of all varieties. DDR, Taiko no Tatsujin, pinball. If you could think of it, it's probably there. The music portion is also pretty huge, as MagFest hosts concerts by chiptune artists and video game cover bands, which are always a great time. If music and games are your favorite things, then you'll feel right at home with MagFest. I could go on, but the truth is that a lot of events that do happen are often general pop culture events, so there aren't necessarily a ton of gaming-specific events. But if you like pop culture as well as games, there are plenty of options to choose from, like Comic-Con, MomoCon, Fan Expo, and so on. While I would love to cover every single one of those in this video, that would make this a slippery slope into turning this into a full-on World Convention Guide video, and I am not trying to do that. But the thing to take away is that conventions, while they are expensive to attend, that's for damn sure, are absolutely worthwhile if you're a fan, and very rewarding if you're trying to network in the industry and you play your cards right. Since I haven't been to too many conventions myself, I want to know, what is your best convention memory? Or your most wild convention story? Or just, what is a convention you really like going to and why? Feel free to let me know in the comments down below. that's going to be it for me. Stay vibing and thriving, everyone, and I will see you in the next one.